Me encanta este cuento. Mujeres libres en un valle perdido del Himalaya.
Ezerk ez ninduke zoriontsuago egingo berriro libre eta arin sentitzeak baino.
Kaixo, egunon. Así egingo dugu el sueño de la Sultana filmaren prentsaurrekoa.
Hola, good morning. We're going to start the press conference of Sultana's Dream, which, as you know, is a co-production between Spain and Germany, and its worldwide premiere is here in San Sebastian Festival in the official section. Apart from competing for the Golden Shell, it is also for the Ibiza Award for Basque Cinema. It's the Basque animator. It's first incursion into a feature film. I'm going to present everyone. Diego Herrera, producer. IVÁN MIñAMBRES, producer. FABIAN DRIEHORST, producer. MARIANO BARATECH, producer. GIANMARCO SERRA, screenwriter, editor and composer. ISABEL, director, screenwriter and producer. CHELO, LOUREIRO, executive producer. MIREN, ARRIETA, actress. MOUSHUMI, BHOWMIK, author of the poem of the song Vida de Roqueilla, and UPAMANYU BHATTACHARYYA, artist. Big round of applause for everyone involved in the film, please. I'm going to ask a first question, and please, meanwhile, please raise your hand so that I can give you the floor. I wanted to ask a question to Isabel first. It's your first feature film, but you have a long trajectory in the world of short films. When did the idea emerge of Sultana's Dream, and when you realized that this story will require would last longer than a normal feature film? Hi, morning, Mayalin. Well, the idea of doing the film was when I found the book. Not even 10 seconds went by when I thought, I feel like working with this material. After, slowly but surely, and as with Gianmarco, we started to do the workshops that we did with girls and women and with artists of Mendi in India to see the relevance that the feminist utopia that Roqueilla proposed. We saw that not only did we simply have the material of reconstructing the country of women that Roqueilla presents in the world, but also that trip that we were doing through India and in contact with all of these women, that also deserved some space within the narrative, and also the life of this incredible woman, Roqueilla Sakar Hussein. That is to say, not only it was going to be a short film upon the country of women, but also all the experience that surrounded it, plus the world of Roqueilla that could make up that. We thought it could end up being a feature film. First row, please. Question. Hi. Sorry, we can't hear him. I'm sorry. Yes, we can now. I wanted to ask you about the techniques, the animation techniques. What was all that work of mixing all of that, working with the rest of the animators, men and women? And obviously, I would like to ask you about the distribution of the voices with Miren Arrieta and even with Paul. And the rest of the characters also. How did you choose that? Let's see if I can remember all the questions you've asked me. I'm sorry. First of all, about the animation techniques. As I've told you, initially we thought there was going to do the country of women, Ladyland, that is to say. But I thought we wanted to do it with the technique of temporal tattoo, because we'd done some workshops with women. We developed to be able to tell the story, and we established a relationship with them. In the part of Roqueilla's life, we wanted to do something similar to the shadow theater, which is a very popular entertainment at the beginning of the century, and when Roqueilla, when she grew up. And thirdly, the driving line of all the stories, that is to say, that framework which encompasses it, which is the trip, the journey of Ines, the protagonist. And we wanted to do it, and her logbook of journeys, that is to say, in this case it was watercolor, and this we use the traditional tradition of 2D animation. And innocently, I thought that if we distributed the work in different teams, it was going to end up all being much lighter or much easier to do vis-a-vis production, which is something that doesn't solve too many things, nevertheless. But we also divided into 3 teams, one in India for the part of Ladyland, and also another team in Navarra, Mania Manero, and Eduardo Rossi. Eduardo Rossi is from here. And finally, animation, 2D animation is done in the Glow, in Almendralejo, the same people that did Buñuel in the Labyrinth or the Maze of the Turtles, and all of the backgrounds are done here in Tabacalera with the hand of Ángel Perisi, artists such as Ángel Perisi, Sandra Gadrayoa, with whom over 6 months in an artistic residence we did all the backgrounds manually, and voices. Yes, the next question, voices. About voices, and thanks that we got in touch with Fernando Bernues and Mireia Gabilondo, who put us in contact with Miren and with Mireia, who are the 2 voices from here. Then, Gianma, can you talk about the voice in Italian, Roberto Essi? And Paul as well. Paul, yes, that's right, and very well. Let's see. Throughout the process of writing the script and imagining it in San Telmo in 2015, there were some conferences vis-a-vis the Paul Preciado. I don't know whether you remember, he gave a conference there, and I remember we attended these conferences, and for me, it was quite revealing to go further in depth upon the issue of utopian issues. Well, Gianma, when we wrote the script, was why not incorporate that very important moment, which was during the development of the project, to be able to have Paul along with us. We wrote some dialogues, we sent it to him, and this was during the pandemic, and quite generously he recorded the dialogues. And Maribel, I'm a big follower of Maribel, and I found her also in the same place where she appears in the Capitolini Museum, and I wanted to thank her very much for what she does for culture. And after a very short period of time, I read Women and Power, and we heard a conference. We asked her for permission whether we could use her words, and she also kindly afforded them and gave us an okay. And Miren's voice, we loved it. It seduced us really, because she's managed to portray the character extraordinary. She gave her life and a truly unique personality. It was been a privilege to be able to work with her. And it was back to front. We didn't have the scenes. She put the voice to it. She didn't know what the film was. We were talking about the dialogues and the textures and how we would like to convey certain feelings. And the truth is, her performance exceeded our expectation. It was extraordinary. And we've recorded voices in India during the pandemic. Sometimes we were able to be in Calcutta, but we did it via Zoom with some recording studios. And the voices in Italy, I was in charge of that. And there are a lot of languages in the film, as you've been able to see, and it was the choice of maintaining these languages and it's also a sound journey. And it's also a sound journey, the film, that's what I meant. Hi, good morning. Congratulations to all of you. Your film's magnificent. I would like to ask you, Isabel, about global feminism, the feminism that leaves to one side Western view on it. 1 out of every 6 women in the world is Indian. And how's that new feminism? I'm interested in the decision of extending feminism on the one hand, and also in your own life, that's because an animation film is a nightmare at the end of the day. And for obviously, I see CHELO. You form part of that army of crazy people that do this work. But what's your personal decision of getting into? Why had you get involved in this journey, which not always would turn out well, and the feminist issue? Yes, thank you. Well, I discovered For me, the discovery of Rokeya Hussein was a kind of turning things upside down. It was such an inspiration. It was like a mantra that over the last 10 years have made me much more aware of my condition as a woman, I think she means. That's why it's emerged almost naturally, and that same natural way I've read a lot about women and women authors in India. I'm not an expert in feminism, and even less so Asian feminism, but I have read a lot about it, and I have shared this experience with many women in India, including MOUSHUMI and Sultana, and there's something which is common to all of them. Be they Indian, be they German, be they Latin American, whatever, and that is, it's a common complicity towards the fact of being a woman, and this is something that unites us beyond the fact that we speak different languages and that we are different. And the other question was about specific animation. Well, animation. Yes, the journey of doing it in animation. Well, the journey was a long journey. It was a lot of ups and downs. We cried, we laughed. Like life, it's mixed with fiction, and you incorporate everything, and it's a journey in which you can't go back once you've started. You let go and you go, okay, you're out in the sea and let's see what happens. Whatever God may deem, but let's make sure we make it to the harbor we're looking for. So therefore, we knew we were going to make it to that harbor and to that port with all of the doubts that you may have, but you've got to look at trying to resolve problems and the doubts, the day-to-day doubts that emerged while we were doing the project. Hi, congratulations for the film. It's a fantasy and an extraordinary enjoyment. My question is specific for Gianfranco or for Isabel. How did you decide what sound to put in Ladyland, in that battle that takes place? Because that's the philosophy, it's the sound which is which defends the country or the land, and to not alienate the people in the film theater. The sound, we did it with Simon Bastian in Hamburg, but a lot of the sound came from my archives in my recordings in India. But in Ladyland, we've done a slight change vis-a-vis the original story. In the original story by Beyond Rakeya, saying the women have some mirrors and they burn the enemy army. While we were working on it, the Ukraine war started, and we thought that the message could be a bit more attenuated. And with Simon was extraordinary here in this part. We thought that perhaps it could be a sound that frightened the men and got them to go away forever. So there's a big change in the volume of the sound and the frequencies, because it had to be one single sound throughout the film, and that's a moment in which the levels changes, the frequencies change in the sound, and the changes the way we move the sound vis-a-vis to the speakers. If you've seen the film, it takes a very short period of time, but it had to be something unique within the film, the sound that they used. Over here, please. Hi, good morning. Congratulations for the film and for the work you've done. My question is related to the digital presence in the film. Seeking in internet, searching in internet, when you write in Google, Sultana's Dream, there's a lot of information on the book. And a few weeks back, there seems to be much more about the film. But in Instagram profile, 9 years ago, it was created. And it's quite curious because you mix photos of children's photos, different types of photos. How did that emerge naturally, whether you had any digital strategy or simply a photo at the airport, or that is to say, could you explain the whys and whereabouts, or how important it is for you, that digital communication that you have, and how was it to feed the profile of the film over these years. No, there was no awareness of any digital communication at all. I opened up an Instagram account. I put Sultana's Dream, and that's what it is, to upload the workshop with the children, some drawings I was doing in India, but with a lot of experimentation. Then when we started with the production, they said, well, okay, let's use the same account that we had on Instagram, which was already open, to feed it with, put in many more things about the film specifically. So there's a mixture of as a personal account, and now finally it's the film account. So therefore, the truth is we should delete everything we did beforehand. I'm not too sure, I don't know. That's the story of the film, really. That's the story of the film per se. We can't delete anything. It's all of it that's there. It's very important. Everything that Isabel has done for so many years. The film was done thanks to that precisely, actually. I'd like to take advantage to take a double question to Gianmarco and Isabel. On the one hand, the film has a structure, a narrative structure, which is not very habitual or regular, and it's more like a puzzle structure, or a structure of the 1001 Nights, that is to say, which is different in cinema. And you manage, there have been a lot of references of all types, from feminist to cinematographic, and perhaps more of the Indian tradition and so on and so forth. Could you please develop that, or further in depth, these two ideas? I'll answer the first part, and you answer the second part, okay. Okay, as regards the structure, I think the structure emerged like when you paint a painting. That is to say, at the beginning, you've got a general idea that perhaps the tones that you're going to use, but at the end is when you make up the full final end image. And the same thing happened with the screenplay, because some scenes were first drawn, first imagined, and then described with words, and others, all the contrary. Some were written and then they were drawn. So therefore, all of this, it's just like life. While other episodes that started to incorporate themselves, it's a puzzle, that is to say, when you start to fit things together and you see the final edition, which makes up the final screenplay. We worked, as we were drawing, we were drawing some images, we gave it a background soundtrack, we saw whether it worked, and we put it with the following scene. So therefore the script slowly but surely is like the last stage, because the structure was made up with a series of images over a timeline with sound and with some dialogues. Now, Jan, if you want to talk, Gianmarco, about the references. Let's see if I can remember. The film has a lot of references, but they are at a second level, and they are there like a tribute to some of the masters that inspired us. For example, the shower section, that was from Psycho, from Hitchcock, and there's a reference. Noche Americana, the cat, the Nita American by Truffaut, with a cat which is present. Sergei Eisenstein, Ivan the Terrible, if you remember, the feet that come in front of you, and then with a smile and the little finger. Then you've got the waiter who speaks in the museum. That comes from Buñuel's Via Láctea. There says Ines lives in Apuga Star in Calcutta. The Apu's trilogy, which is Isabel's favorite author, Veni con Noi, and then the Dolce Vita, Marcello, Veni con Noi, obviously, the City of Women, and the Italian cinema. And there's a big traffic jam at the beginning. Everyone looks at Ines, which is the beginning of Fellini's Ocho y Media. For example, then you've got the big wall of The Dream by Ines Manara, what he did which was a tribute to John Lennon. Then we've got, I don't know, and 1 in 1,000 Silences when Ines goes back to San Sebastian. It's a tribute to Bergman, the silence. She looks for answers, but is surrounded by silence. And also other, if people spoke less, they'd be much happier, those sort of references. And then the park scene with the smoke that covers everything is my favorite film. The Eclipse by Antonioni, and the heads of the cut-off horses, Guimadin, a heap more, I don't remember them all. But They're part of the film, but they are also tributes to masters that are like the SERRA tributes to literature, music, cinema, and everything that has inspired us throughout over these last few years. Hi, I'm going to, please, the perception of the Indian side of the things. I can't see what your names are, but could you tell us? Yeah. MOUSHUMI Upa, pleased to meet you. Could you please tell us what's your perception? Your perception. And as regards the film, Isabel, how was it perceived within Indian feminism, this film? How was it perceived within Indian feminism? And I forgot a question I was going to ask for Isabel, but I'll come back to that.
Maybe MOUSHUMI, you can ask.
MOUSHUMI?
Yeah, so when Isabel told me that she's going to make this film on Begum Rokea's Sultana's Dream, it's one of the seminal texts for us, especially women who are interested in, women's rights, in feminism, especially in Bengal, where I come from. She writes in my language. But this book she had written actually in 1905 in English. She first wrote in English. And so this has been a seminal text for Indian feminists for over the past decades. But it's viewed differently by different people. Over the years it's evolved how we perceive this text. But of course the film, basically, it also changes. It grows out of the text, and it becomes much more than the text. So it is Isabel's interpretation of the text. And I think even for us, at the ground level where we live and how we perceive women's rights, I think Rokeya is perceived differently. I mean, it can't be the same as it was in the 60s and the 70s, 80s, because she was from... Bengal was partitioned in 1947. It became two countries later in it was Pakistan, later became 1971, it became Bangladesh. So where Rokeya would have come from, that is now part of Bangladesh now. So with the sort of the birth of the new nation of Bangladesh, Rokeya became an iconic figure for the women of Bangladesh, and in their realization of their dreams, Rokeya. So you have the, students' halls named after Rokeya. There are organizations named after Rokeya. There are so many things. And I personally worked on an anthology of Bengali Muslim women writers with my co-editor in Bangladesh, and we started with Rokeya's writings. But of course, Rokeya herself, she, the question of the veil, the question of parda, it's very critical to her writing. So when she's thinking of Ladyland as this land of emancipation for women, how would we perceive it today? Do we really want to lock up our men? What does it mean, when we're thinking of the sound that is going to drive away men? Is it going to drive away men? Or is it going to drive away those forces which cause war, which are those, I mean, we think of gender differently now, don't we? So it is a different thing from 1905, I think. So we perceive things differently as time goes, but she remains relevant for us, I think.
Just for Isabel, the high culture, the decision that you make, perhaps, do you think to what audience, what is the audience of Sultana's Dream, and whether those decisions of including thinkers that can penalize us vis-a-vis box office, but we don't care. The truth is, I don't think about the audience. I think about making the best possible film, which I would like to see. So therefore, if Paul Preciado and Mary Verse is here, well, And after seeing the film, look for information that's necessary, and you'll discover two great people and marvelous people of which that we should learn from. But to think about the audience is not the way I do things. We've talked about the complicated journey of making an animation film. I want to take advantage that you've got so many producers sitting down here with us to get to know what your perspective and your complicity. When did you get on board Isabel's project? And it's expanded over time. And how did you set up an animation film such as this film, Sultana's Dream? Well, I would start by saying that this film is the film that I've received most no's from when I've produced, and you can imagine why. But it was clear in my mind that the film had to be what Isabel Helguera wanted to make and not anything else. It was absolutely, that was important for me. And that's why we had to confront many difficult moments, undoubtedly. And above all, because I always try for directors to do their work and direct the best way possible. Do not get them involved in the day-to-day problems of the financing side of things. And in this case, it was quite difficult because obviously 10 years ago, as you can see, it was 2015, was already, Jean was inspiring. It was a very long journey, that's what I meant. And so therefore, and this country has changed quite a lot because the word feminist, everyone wanted for it to disappear from the film. The word feminist, they said, with that, you're not going to ever make this film possible. And the truth is, just like Maria says, some crazy people, we continue to, because we wanted to make a different type of cinema. And albeit it being difficult, we don't want to make a lot of money. We want to show films that we feel very proud to show. And that's what we found on the journey, people that have abandoned us and fantastic people like Mariano BARATECH. And in Spain, we've got the regions where we can find funding. Mariano from Madrid, Diego, Ivan from the Basque Country, me from Galicia, and we found Fabian in Germany, which made it possible for us to finish it, and we found Jose in Glow Studio, which gave us all the facilities, made everything, and even financing, which is just the max, isn't it? And I wanted to recognize this in front of everyone because Almendralejo is now appearing in the media for other issues. And what it should appear is because of the fantastic team that they have there in Glow Animation in Almendralejo. And not only, but because this is a film which is quite special. And when we make films, auteur films, we have to respect the personality of the author, even graphically. And with Isabel, they have to be animators that would adapt themselves because it's an industrial piece of work. Isabel, bear in mind, she's used to doing everything on her own because short films are more handmade, but a long feature film can't be. And the industrial side of things is which was most difficult for them to get into, because otherwise there wasn't a film. We would have taken another 10 years to finish it. And there's been great generosity by them and by all of the animation team. So it's been fantastic. The truth is, and here we are today. So therefore, and this is what makes us think that we were going down the right path. And despite the fact from the outset, I must say, that Isabel and Gianma were convinced that this film is for all the audiences and kids are going to love it. And this is what they're convinced of. Okay, so therefore, I hope a lot of schools can see our films and they can see them in the classrooms, and this can be useful in order to raise awareness and to change, the truth be said, this male chauvinist world we live in, and that's because it's very complicated. Women throughout the world. To complement what CHELO just mentioned, Isabel, he says, when I believe, I don't think about the audience. I take that on. In cinema with producers, when she said that, I said, well, oh my God, what am I getting into? if we don't have an audience. But it's a very complex process. An artist that starts to make a painting or composing music may not think of the audience. They think about their own visual creation. But in cinema, it's not art itself. Cinema needs production, that you've got to get money and aid from TV and everything. The market's got to validate your product, so to speak. And I think it was a process that from the outset, as CHELO says, the producers have seen how we made a film and how you manage a film and how we adapt to the possible audiences. I think that process, the truth is that possible audience has appeared and is going to be there, I'm sure. But the artist, when she expresses, like Isabel, and she expresses herself freely, obviously that audience, she will find that audience, and she does it, especially in a process like this, which has taken so many years. And we producers adapted ourselves to a process in Isabel's process and how the work was done. So therefore, Isa is part of the artistic creation that permits animation. It's much more difficult. You've got a screen, you've got a script, and you can play a bit in the editing room. But animation was a very long process where we've been able to play a lot and to turn things around very much in the process. And there's a beautiful product, and there's going to be an audience for that product, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would like to add just a few words from the German side, because I came on board very late, and I came on board as a fan. Because I saw the trailer that was online several years ago, and I met Isabel in Cologne in Germany, where she is a professor at the Academy of Media Arts. And I was said, like, if you need any support, I would like to help. And at that time, there were 3 other international co-producers, potentially co-producers, and none of them actually could make it happen. It's like the no's that CHELO was mentioning that were part of the project. And so the project was already in production, and coming on in a project which is already in production is even more challenging than in the beginning. And we were actually lucky, and I would like to point that out, because a broadcaster from ZDF Arte trusted in the project, even though the screenplay was not a classic screenplay, but like the way it was, like more a very emotional version of it with some beautiful drawings, and they trusted in that. And they made it happen that we could actually come on board. And yes, we got also no's in Germany, but I also believe everyone is demanding a new way of storytelling in cinema and in the movies. And I think this is an excellent example of how you can tell a story very different, and you can have an extremely unique experience in cinema. And I'm actually super happy that we can start here and that this can travel the world and find its audience. Thank you.
Hi again. We're 3 days of the festival so far, and every day there's been an animation film in the official section. By the way, Miyazaki, for example, and we saw Trevor Mariscal's film, and yours today, and yours is in the competition section. I don't know whether you have any assessment, Isabel, or the producers, for example, whoever wants to answer this question. What do you think about this, that there's so many animation, especially in a very important part of the film festival, which is the official section? What do you think about that? Ivan? Well, it's a delight, I believe. We've been working for animation we've been working for it to be not a genre, but be valued because of the story we tell. The 3 films that you've mentioned are 3 great stories, very different, and each of them with their own personality. Well, I'm very, very happy with this festival like San Sebastian. Values films not because they're animation or documentary, but because of the stories themselves, and we have a presence in a setting such as San Sebastian. I think it's marvelous. Yes, animation, the truth is not a genre. We forget animation. I can tell any type of story of any type of genre, comedy, terror, and comedy, whatever. So therefore, the way we tell them is with animation techniques, and what's important is the story, and undoubtedly the quality has to come along at the same level. But it's very difficult because it's quite complicated, because the truth is quite often programmers that are not involved in the animation world so much, or don't, and it's very difficult for them to to wager in favor of us. But I think that slowly but surely, with the fact that we women are finally achieving and being able to direct animation films, and animation in Spain, which has a very high quality, by the way, and you can see it in the two of the films are Spanish that are animation films, and probably are going to be in many other international film festivals. And then before they said, why animation? Well, because when you've seen Isabel's quality of Isabel's work out throughout the career, to tell this story in another way would have been completely impossible. And I think it's very, very beautiful that it's done this way, and it's a great value for the film, of that artistic deployment and beautiful deployment that the work has itself. That is to say, the film. Yes, a question for Isabel. I'd like to know whether you could say, I seem to have understood, it's a 10-year production that's taken you to make the film. How many people participated, if you could say, and the budget that you've had used? And then it was blown me away by that what is that about temporary tattoos? No, it's not been 10 years production. Over the 10 years, no, it's been work, but production started in February 2020, a month before everything closed down, lockdown before the pandemic. And since then, until a month ago, it's been purely production. And vis-a-vis temporary tattoo is done with sort of cones, like if you're a baker, where you put in the paste of plants and herbs. That is to say, that traditionally it's painted on the body. When we proposed in the first of the workshops, artists of the Mandi to work upon paper, initially they were a bit surprised because the paste they use, it has a certain volume and thickness. Once they got used to managing this paste on the paper, in a day they adapted themselves perfectly. Another thing was their traditional designs, how to adapt them to representing human figures or a building, or there are certain things like the trees that adapt themselves perfectly because of the ornamentation that's used for decoration, but there are other things that we had to create. But anyway, but slowly but surely, we started to create a, shall we say, a library of images. And you can go to the Bacalera, by the way, there's an exhibition of the work process, and you can see exactly all of the drawings, or many of the original drawings, and from where all the drawings from India, how they come from. And what was the other question? Oh, budget. Oh, how many people? Well, over the years, many people have been involved. The truth is, I can't even give you a figure. Maybe there's 50 or I don't know. Or 150, I think she said. Well, budget, she can talk about the budget. When we talk about budget, it's always a thorny issue, because the budgets that we manage is where many people have collaborated almost altruistically. I think all the professionals have to be paid. Everyone who works in a film should be paid. But the truth is, one thing is to get paid what you normally get paid, and another thing is when there isn't too much of a budget, everyone tightens their belt a bit and try to do it whichever way. But the budget of this film that we have paid 2 million euros max, but what we should have paid should have been a minimum. The work that these people, so many people done with such a high quality, charging much less than what they should, undoubtedly I can guarantee that in the use it would be a minimum of 50 million to make this film. I can tell you that for sure. I want to give the voice to MIREN ARRIETA, the fact that she's with us because she's a voice in the film, and ask her, how do you prepare to participate in an animation film like Sultana's Dream? Hi. Well, for me, it's been an experience that was completely new because, of course, I come from the theater world and TV, and I'm used to working with my body and we're using my voice, obviously. But for me, the challenge was to find the voice of Ines. And as Gianmarco said, it wasn't a dubbing process because when I recorded the voices, I didn't see any images. I was in a studio with a microphone, and I was quite fortunate to have Gianmarco and Isabel's guidelines that they say they don't have experience by directing actors, but I felt that I was in very good hands, and it was very clear to me what they wanted in each scene, what temperature the voice of the character had to have. For example, I felt well directed at all times, and in fact, this was seeing something new for me, but a challenge, but I enjoyed myself very much. And then also, when I was recording, I didn't know what images were going to accompany the voices that I was being recording. Then when I had the opportunity of seeing the result, it exceeded all of my expectations. I imagine the same has happened to you, and I'm very, very happy, and I feel like seeing the result on the big screen today, of course. And in 3 languages. Yes, languages. There we go. Basque, Spanish, yes. English. Yes. It was quite gratifying for me, yes. Truth is said. We have time for one final question. And just clear up that in animation, we record the voices before animating because the voice also is going to help us to compose the personality of the character. And that is why we seek for actors, because they don't dub, they're really performing. Theatre actors are very good for this type of work. Okay, time for a final question. Hi, good morning. Congratulations for the work. You were talking about languages. I'd like to ask you about that. Then you mix the languages in a very natural way, by the way. In some cases, like Ines, the other languages of where she lives, but a bit more. How did you choose? What was the idea of mixing all of those languages? Well, yes, when one travels, one finds all kinds of languages, isn't that right? So therefore, to a certain extent, and quite naturally, one ends up understanding, despite understanding the sounds, and that's what it's all about, more than exactly understanding the words. It's understanding the sounds. Quite briefly, this last question, final question in the front row here. Congratulations for the film, but I'd like to ask you whether you have a date of premiere date in Germany and in India exactly as well. Do you know when it's going to be premiered? In Spain, 17th of November. It will be distributed by Film, and in Germany?
So the premiere is in the film festival in Hamburg on October 5th, followed by Doc Leipzig 1 week later. And the theatrical release will be for the International Women's Day on March 8th. I think it's March 7, the Thursday, will be the theatrical release in Germany.
Y el estreno también en la India, en el festival, que no sé.
And in India, can we say it now? India, what festival? Can we say that? We don't know if we can say that.
It's not official. It's not official.
No.
Okay.
We should.
Pero se estrenará, sí.
But it will be premiered in India. Don't fret. A big round of applause for everyone involved in the team and who's been here with us today. Thank you.